Trump's former attorney Rudy Giuliani is conceding now that he made false statements about two women who worked the 2020 election in the state of Georgia. That's from a court filing related to a lawsuit filed by the women who alleged they were harassed after Giuliani claimed they committed election fraud. They did not. In the filing, lawyers wrote Giuliani, quote, does not contest that to the extent the statements were statements of fact and otherwise actionable, such actionable factual statements were false. I'll translate that for you. He lied. Ruby Freeman and her daughter Shaye Moss have said their lives were turned upside down when conspiracy theorists, as well as then President Donald Trump and his ally Giuliani, made those false allegations against Freeman and her daughter Rev. We know Ruby Freeman, Shaye Moss, they testified before Congress about what they went through when they were blindsided by this, when Giuliani went public, when he went to the Georgia state legislature and made these totally invented claims that they were passing USB sticks between each other, caught on video with voter information. When they came out and said, no, I was passing her a mint, is what we were handing back and forth. But it's deadly serious that people were showing up at their houses, trying to push their way in. We want to find evidence of fraud. They were getting death threats. They quit their jobs. Maybe it was a game to Rudy Giuliani, but it was very real to Shaye Moss and Ruby Freeman.
It was very real to these two women, and it was very real to many of those that were the believers of Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani. You must remember, Rudy Giuliani was a federal prosecutor, and after that, mayor of New York, and became America's mayor after 9/11. So someone with that kind of stature, you would not think, if you were some objective American, that why would he just fabricate these two women in Georgia working at the board? He must have some basis for this. You're not talking about an average Joe. This is a former federal prosecutor. And so when people reacted and responded, it really set these women on a course that was, how do they stand up against someone with that kind of stature, even though those of us in New York would have told them he was not all of that anyway. I mean, the sanitized bio on Rudy Giuliani was never real to us. And for him now to just say, well, yeah, I didn't say it in fact, but I didn't damage them. So like death threats and being harassed and having this worry about even going to the corner store, that doesn't damage you?
This is just one element, too, of many, many statements that he and others made in the context of the election was rigged. After the election of 2020. And it brings to mind a famous quote that has stood for a long time. A former Secretary of Labor in the United States government under a Republican administration was tried and acquitted for specific crimes.
Yeah.
And he stood on the steps of the courthouse after his acquittal saying, where do I go now to get back my reputation? Where do these women go now to get back their reputations? Where do they go to get paid or whatever, compensated for the damage that's been done to them?
And where do they go back to get all of the stress they lived under, to on a daily basis wonder about the target they had become for people that felt they had robbed Donald Trump of this election? You really can't make it up to them, but you can certainly say that the damages are there. They should at least suffer some, he should suffer some damages for what he did to this young.
Jonathan Lemire, this also follows a pattern for Rudy Giuliani and other people who would go on TV or podcasts or other places and make these outlandish claims about the 2020 election. When the rubber meets the road and they have to go to court and make the case and argue, they back off. Rudy Giuliani did this in a number of courtrooms, said, well, actually, I know I said all that on TV. I don't have evidence that the election was stolen. Now he's faced with a lawsuit. He said, yeah, truth be told, I made that stuff up about those two women.
Yeah, Giuliani and Sidney Powell did that time and again in November, December, January of 2020 into 2021, where they would say one thing on air and something very different in the courthouse. You know, certainly we know that there are others in Trump's orbit who have done the same. We also know the penalty paid by Fox News for regurgitating those lies in the Dominion voting systems case, and there's more litigation potentially to come. But I'll just say, I wrote about these two women in my book. The book came out 1 year ago today, I just recall. and that they were far from alone, though, in their stories, their harrowing stories. They talked about how people would show up at their door and knock. They'd call in the middle of the night, harass them, use terrible racial slurs, and they feared for their life. There are other poll workers across this country who had the same experiences because of the harassment they faced by Donald Trump supporters who were adhering to the big lie. And that's a real concern for people this time around, especially if Trump's at the top of the ticket for Republicans again. I've spoken to election workers in several states, battleground states, who say they're going to have a hard time staffing polling places. They're going to have a hard time getting volunteers or these lowly paid workers who are doing it out of a sense of civic obligation. And they're going to have a hard time getting them to man the polls this time around because of the fear that they might be the next victims of harassment.
Yeah, I mean, Shaye Moss told the story in that testimony during the impeachment trial of her grandmother calling her in hysterics, saying there are some men here trying to push their way into the house to look for you and Ruby Freeman because of what they heard from Rudy Giuliani. Now admitting again that he made it all up.